Hello and welcome back. Today we will be continuing our Victoria 3 tutorial series, and what we're going to be talking about today is the strongest kind of expansion tool you have if you are looking to play with low infamy, and that is the yo-yo sway. And we'll talk about how it works, but before we do, I just kind of wanted to show off a little what we've managed to do with it, which is namely that you can subjugate enormous powers for free for a 0 infamy cost. You notice we barely have any infamy this run. We haven't done one of the multiple ways in which you can reset infamy, and we have Austria as our subject, we have UK as our subject, and we have the United States of America as our subject, all starting as Belgium, and we acquired all of these for free. So we're going to talk about, first, the yo-yo sway itself. Second, we're going to talk about the main tool for the yo-yo sway, which is being able to threaten your opponent with a ton of conscripts. And third, we are going to talk a little bit about optimization and how specifically you go down the path of getting these absolutely massive powers to be your subject for absolutely free. So, let's get into it. Alright, so let's explain the yo-yo sway. So a normal reverse sway, we have the Great Britain, they're having a revolution, it doesn't look very good for them. We can offer support, and we can try and get a state, for example, and they will have a variety of modifiers that make them accept or not. The key one that's going to be important to us here is going to be how much they're valuing military power. We see that they value it as 96, and their overall acceptance score is 1, where we're getting a couple from some other modifiers, the relations and ideological similarities, and the cost is effectively the value of the requested state, or whatever it is you're asking for. We could trade sway for Ceylon, but we couldn't sway for the South Atlantic Islands. We could also sway for Ecce and Mesquita, but none of the other kingdoms. The way the yo-yo sway works is by going onto one side, we increase the effective value of our army in terms of how the sway is evaluated, and Great Britain will be willing to give us so much more, because now, from their perspective, they've gone from being, just barely worried to minus 75 hyper worried because we are on this side. And so if we come in here and now we offer support, we will see that they are willing to give up any state. And if we take a look at Ceylon, which was a +1, now it's a plus 377. And where this is coming from, the 5 is the same, the 2 is the same, the 102 is the same, but now it really matters, or it really values our military power. And it will value this in the same way, even if this weren't some giant revolution, because it doesn't care about the stakes of the war, it only cares about what the balance of power looks like. So when you do this, when the Mosquito Kingdom rebels, you will be able to get this same sort of 377 value, and you will be able to shake them down for a whole lot more. Now, the balance of power will look a little bit better for them if they're not having a revolution, but the point is you can demand a whole lot more from them if you first sway onto the other side. On top of all this, if we just say transfer British Senegal and we let the game think for a moment, what will end up happening is right now they are going to be wary, they're going to be cautious, something like this. And what happens if they accept, which they are very likely to accept, it will reset their attitudes, and often they will become genial. If we let it tick through 2 ticks, they went from antagonistic back to cautious, and they won't even be mad that you shook them down for the thing. So this is how it works. You go swap one side, and then you swap back to the other side. There is an important requirement, however, for the yo-yo sway. You can see here, we're on one side, and suddenly we can't yo-yo back to the other side. And we're getting this tooltip. The tooltip says the United Netherlands is fighting on the same side as the United Netherlands. Well, what does that mean? I think this has been something that people have struggled with a lot when trying to understand it when I've explained it in other spots. And what this means is that we have to neither be involved in another diplomatic play or be at war. So in this case, this war, we're involved in a war. This means we cannot yo-yo. We're involved in another war, cannot yo-yo. And also, you have to have no other diplo plays available, whether or not you are involved in them. So we are involved in this diplomatic play. It is targeting us. But even if we were completely uninvolved, there has to be 0 other diplomatic plays other than the one you are trying to yo-yo in. And the reason why this is the logic of the game is very strange. You are never allowed to side against an ally in a war. If you are currently on the side of someone in a war, like let's say we would be on the same side as Mexico here, we would not be able to side against Mexico in a different play because we're currently on the same side as them. This is to prevent weird, catastrophic things because the front system cannot handle you being against someone in a war and with them on the same side at the same time. There's no way for it to handle it as far as the logic of fronts goes. And so, from the perspective of the game, when we are trying to side with Guatemala, against the Guatemalan Council of Workers' Deputies, we are trying to side against one of our allies, that ally being ourselves. Shout out to us. And so what this means is that it thinks we're trying to side with one of our allies or against one of our allies, and the game just doesn't let us do it, and this is why we cannot offer support. So what we have to do, we have to make sure we are in no other wars. So we are just going to capitulate out of these wars because we're just trying to illustrate a point. And secondly, there has to be no other diplomatic plays available. It doesn't matter whether or not you're involved in the diplomatic play. We're involved in this one, but it doesn't matter whether or not you're involved in a diplo play. There has to be 0 other diplo plays on the table. There has to be exactly one diplo play, so we'll give in on this one, and that diplo play has to be the one you're trying to yo-yo sway on. And now we see here we can unlock the diplo sway, and the strongest, kind of yo-yo sway you can ever get is to ask to become subject, wherein you will subjugate them for free. And so now we can yo-yo sway, and we could become protectorate. They would have probably accepted this anyways. They don't have a lot of desire to be the subject, but we have so much military power, and that modifier is way stronger. So let's take a look at what the modifier is just very quick, just to kind of reiterate the point. It's very, very high because we are already on the other side. We see it's 237 here. They'd probably accept if we were neutral, but it probably would be close. So if we come here, 237, it turns into they actually just won't accept because they don't value the military power anymore because there isn't this massive imbalance of power from us being on the other side. So this is very, very key. Whenever you are yo-yo swaying, and I'm saying this again for emphasis because I think people have struggled when I've explained it before in some spots, whenever you are trying to yo-yo sway, it has to be the only diplomatic play that exists that you can get involved in. And you also have to not be at war. And so this means that, as a matter of practice, just kind of waiting and not declaring wars all the time is more useful for being able to set yourself up for diplo plays. But we'll talk about that more in a bit. Okay, so let's get a great power for free then. We see now that Austria here is having a revolution, and generally speaking, this is one of the more common ways you can acquire a great power is if they have a revolution. And the reason for this, in order to reverse sway for specifically ask become subject, the target needs to be a minor power. And generally, it's really hard to decay a great power into being a minor power. However, if the great power becomes weak, then sometimes their revolution will be a minor power. And sometimes you can even get the great power to be a minor power. We'll talk about that in a second. But in this case, we have a minor power here, so we can actually sway them to become our subject. They are not willing now, and in fact, they're minus 38, which is actually not that far off, and it values the military power at plus 74, which is not a whole lot. We're involved in 2 plays here, and to be honest, we could actually finish this play, but we're just going to capitulate out of this for the sake of demonstrating the yo-yo sway. We will side actually with Austria right now to show that we cannot actually offer support because it's not letting us because we are already supporting the United Sovereign Archduchy in another play, which is this play, which we could just give into, and now we're no longer supporting ourselves. The truth hurts. And so if we now try and come and become subject, we will see that it went from minus 38 to plus 346, and so we can easily ask them to become our subject. Now, of course, as part of this war, they have annexed all of Austria, so we will have them as our subject, then they will become all of Austria after they annex Austria, and we will have acquired Austria for free. They are a subject. Are they a subject yet, or will they be a subject when war breaks out? I guess they'll be a subject when war breaks out, but we will have acquired it for free. All we have to do is, or after they accept. We just need to wait a moment. They accept, of course, and now they are our protectorate, and we have just gotten Austria for free as long as we win this war, which is more than easy with the amount of army we have available, and we will have gotten this with 0 infamy. You see, our infamy has been 26 this entire time, and now Austria-Hungary is a subject, and it will be so with the rest of it. And that's how we did this in the USA run that we showed off earlier, in both the USA and the United Netherlands run. That is how we did this. Now, this raises the question, well, how do we make this as big a number as possible so that when we yo-yo sway, when we try and sway in for something, we are getting the absolute most out of military power? And it actually is a little bit of an interesting thing. We actually don't have that big an army as the USA, at least not a standing army. We have 179 regulars, but what we have is 2,789 conscripts, which we don't have to pay for if they're not mobilized. However, the AI values this when determining how spooky someone is in a play. So if we go for this yo-yo sway again, and we'll just side with them, and we'll go for become subject, we see that currently it's plus 346. A huge portion of this, right, it's coming from the military power. What we have on the military power is, as long as they are assigned to an army, they don't have to be mobilized, they will view them as being threatening. And so what we could do is we could just assign more, and it was at 346, right? If we just assign a ton more of these conscripts, we can run the number up. Now, it's a little glitchy when you're trying to assign a ton at a time, but it was at 346, right? We could get it a little bit higher, and we have thousands assigned currently just by assigning some more. So we've assigned some more, and we can run this number up higher for become subject, or at least the surplus. Now it's at 350. Similarly, we could delete it down. Now, to be fair, a big part of this is that they are currently having a revolution. There's not a lot of battalions on either side. There's not a lot of military strength on either side. And so overkill is overkill. But this, especially before you have thousands and thousands of conscripts, can make a big deal in terms of the AI's perspective of you changing the balance of power just off the back of conscripts alone. You don't actually need to have a big army, you just need to have the threat of a big army. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about optimizing for strategies so that you can try and get situations where you can get these GPs for free. And the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be, of course, the essence of, Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a Florida man, which is having as big a conscript army that's sitting around that's not doing anything as possible while engaging in the diplo plays. By the way, this will also make people less reluctant, or more reluctant rather, to declare on you, because when they're evaluating your military power in their own head, they still think this through too. And so a few things. The most obvious are going to be, of course, the laws, which is that if you are a national militia, this will give you a plus 100 maximum conscript limit instead of 50 relative to professional army. If you're on peasant levies, you only get 25, if I recall correctly. And so national militia will be good for this. And I think that, kind of following the last two runs that I've engaged in, I think national militia just might be meta over professional army, which is wild that professional army has seemed to be the best for so long, but also the way that the AI evaluates strength and power has been changed a little bit since 1.5, and so it hasn't been around forever. The potential of this strategy, because the AI has always been poorly at evaluating the USA's strategy, which is why in earlier patches, USA used to back down to everything, because the USA used to think that it had no military power because it didn't take into account the conscripts, and now it does. Now it really does, as long as the conscripts are assigned. Important to emphasize, the conscripts do have to be assigned. Also, you can go National Guard for a little bit more conscription rate. But in the early game especially, what might be kind of the saving grace is going to be this enlistment effort decree, which gives 5% conscription rate as well. And so you might find yourself in a situation where you're just 5 to 10 points off of being able to yo-yo sway for something really useful. And then what you can do is you could rake back all your authority, slap down a bunch of enlistment effort decrees in various places, yo-yo sway, then rake back all your authority and put it back to wherever it was being used, and just run the enlistment efforts for 1 week. And so this is kind of the first thing that you can do, is just have as massive a conscript army as possible in order to do this as much as possible, while at the same time this has allowed us as the USA to pay less for our military than like we have in a ton of other runs, while simultaneously maintaining a ton of military power, and instead spending the money on Navy, which gives us more prestige, which is kind of the second thing we need to talk about, or is another thing that we need to talk about, is having a really high prestige count is going to help you to decay down other people to being a major power, or when they have that rev be a minor power, or have them be a minor power. Because the larger your prestige is, the harder it is for other countries to rank up into being either a major power or a great power. And the reason for this is that the calculation for what you need to get for whatever, let's say this Bengal needs to achieve 530, the calculation for this is one of two numbers, whichever is lower, and that is a percentage of the top person's prestige, and so raising your own prestige directly increases that, and also an average prestige level of all the countries, and you can increase that average prestige largely by annexing smaller countries will generally help, but larger countries countries too, because that increases your prestige as well as you do it, but it won't be quite as effective as just annexing people off the bottom of this list, as far as increasing the threshold required to go to a higher prestige level. Now, if we take a look at Austria-Hungary's prestige, we will see it's actually low enough for them to actually decay into minor power if they stayed here for an extended period of time. This is, of course, largely due to the revolution. But if we hover over the prestige modifier, we see they also have declared bankruptcy. And you can actually very consistently ensure that powers will decay down and go bankrupt by first reverse swaying them for the diplomatic pact of a bankroll. You'll notice here, if we take a look at the French Republic, they're a great power, and generally speaking, I think you have to be a great power, or you have to be bigger than the power you're asking for it in order to get a bankroll, but they're also paying us a bankroll. You notice they've declared bankruptcy. In a recent patch, they changed it so that even once you declare bankruptcy, you still have to pay the bankroll. So we're actually in an excellent position, receiving this massive bankroll from France, which is based on our income, not their income. We're in an excellent position to just get them to continue to bankrupt over and over and over again. This will crush their economy. They will have a bad time. You can see the bad time starting here. But also, it will decrease the amount they spend on military, generally speaking. They'll delete flotillas, and all of this will serve to decrease their prestige, which gets them to the point where they're going to be eligible by either them being a minor power or having a subject be a minor power. This is a pretty low prestige for France, and they're not that far off from decaying down to being a major power. And so if they decayed down to be a major power and then they had a revolution, much like how Austria is now, where they're a major power, but their revolution's a minor power, this is what gives us the opportunity to have this happen. And so it's a combination of a ton of things that relate to prestige, but notably speaking, squeezing bankrolls out of them and then just absolutely crushing their economy under the negative bankruptcy modifier is a really, really good way to make these guys small without actually busting them up and forcing them to release nations. They just have this declared bankruptcy modifier. On top of all that, we also are getting massive ticking positive relations from this bankroll, which is making it so that they just absolutely love us, and in order to reverse sway, or in order to sway on anyone's side, you need to not have really, really bad relations. And so this allows you to just keep super maxed out relations with all the major powers, or all the great powers. And so getting these bankrolls is very, very, very useful. Perhaps like more useful than like getting a pretty big state, like something like the French Low Counties. Excellent state, has a ton of coal. It still might be better to get the bankroll, because now we open ourselves up for more possibilities of stuff like this, where we can just get the entire bag. We just wait a tick, and then we yo-yo sway, and we go for become subject and ask them to become a protectorate here. Easy peasy. Now, this isn't meant to be sort of exhaustive guide for this, but interests are also going to play a huge role in this, because the more diplomatic plays that occur, the more opportunities we're going to have for really good yo-yo sways, and this involves us having an interest in the region. If we didn't have an interest in South Germany and Danubia, wherever this play is being declared for Austria, we would not have the opportunity to yo-yo sway. So maximizing your declared interest is also going to be really important. You can see here, we're getting a ton of interest by having a ton of subjects all over the place. You can also increase interest by increasing your navy, and so doing these two things together is going to be a really good look. There are also some places that are just extremely strong to have interests in, like for example, La Plata is really good to have an interest in, because it's very easy to get Argentina as Chile as subjects, because eventually they'll have a native uprising, and in the native uprising, nearly 100% of the time, you can yo-yo sway to make them a subject, and then you will have a native interest in the region in order to get the other one. Similarly, having interest in North India or Oceania, when Great Britain has subject revolutions, you will be able to yo-yo sway in that subject revolution, side with Great Britain, get stuff like a bankroll, get transfer subjects, get all these types of things. And so having and maximizing and playing around declared interest, trying to have interest in places where you're trying to get bankrolls, where you're trying to squeeze stuff off of people, is going to be an important part of the overall strategy, although we're not going to cover it in an exhaustive way here. It's just something that's very, very important for this strategy. Okay, so the final optimization strategy I wanted to talk about is that I think you should just try and not be at war as long as possible, and wait for these opportunities while still making sure you're decaying infamy. So you generally want to get chunks of infamy in as short a time period as you can. Always have your infamy decay going, because if you're not using your infamy decay, you're losing it. Trying to stay under 25, but other than that, trying to not be at war and trying not to be engaged in a war, because if we were involved in a war, let's say if we were in the middle of annexing Argentina, we would not be able to yo-yo sway into this play, and so we would have to choose between giving up Argentina or getting Austria-Hungary as a subject. Obviously, we'd want to get Austria-Hungary as a subject, but this would mean we would have to give up Argentina because we would be trying to annex them and we'd have to capitulate out. But if we instead just chilled, and, well, we kind of had no chill, but if we did just chill, and we wait for this opportunity to yo-yo sway, and then we yo-yo sway, and only after we're involved in this yo-yo sway, so now we're involved in a play. Once you yo-yo sway, right, now we're in a play. Now we cannot yo-yo sway again until this play is over, so now is also the perfect opportunity, once they accept, for us now to start our play of our own, and we can go into diplomatic demands, we can reduce autonomies in a bunch of places. Well, we can do this no matter what, because it's not going to keep us locked into a play, but now would be the time to annex Argentina, where we can just go through this, and now we can be at a war. The amount of overlap we're going to have is roughly equal to this. Argentina refuses demands. It's going to be roughly this, like, 60 days, and so we're maximizing the amount of days that we are at peace, which is hopefully going to put us in a good position where we will have the most opportunities to yo-yo sway as possible, giving us the most free value we possibly can. And this is just kind of like a bit of a subtle one, but I found myself in a ton of spots where it was like, if only I wasn't involved in this diplomatic play already. And then I found myself just trying to avoid diplo plays until I yo-yo swayed. And then once I yo-yo swayed, then getting involved in my proactive diplomatic plays. Alright, to summarize, the yo-yo sway is far, far, far better than just a reverse sway, which often doesn't really allow you to get too good of things. And what you do with the yo-yo sway is you join the other side, and then by joining the other side, they suddenly find you way more threatening and are willing to accept much, much, much bigger things. You can use this to get subjects like Austria-Hungary, either through a revolt or through Austria-Hungary themselves. It is very, very, very strong. Important to note is you have to be not involved in either a war or any other diplomatic play, either involved in or being available whatsoever. It has to be the one and only other diplomatic play, which means you'll have to declare neutrality for all the others or capitulate your way out of wars. For this, the big driving force that allows you to sway in and get protectorates for free is going to be that you have a large military. However, the AI does not evaluate your military just based on your standing army, but instead will also evaluate it based on conscripts. So having a bunch of conscripts will allow you to shake people down for free stuff. Important to note is that the conscripts need to be assigned to an army, but they don't need to be mobilized, meaning you can threaten them with just having a bunch of fake army that you never ever use, although you can use if you want. For maximizing this, it's going to be important to go national militia, which I think might be meta now, or going something like, what is the other one we could do? National Guard, in order to get a nice conscription rate. You can also go into edicts, but it's important to note that national militia does increase the cap up to 100, but the enlistment for an edict is also going to give you 5% conscription rate, which is going to be really strong when you are really small or relatively small early on in the game to maximize the amount of conscripts you have for this threatening sort of stuff. Also important is going to be having a lot of diplomatic interests. The more interests you have in various areas, the more plays you will be able to yo-yo sway into in order to get free stuff. And finally, what's going to be really important is with the GPs in particular, they will generally not have revs that are anything but GPs. And what you will need to do in order to get them to decay down is you will need to get them to declare bankruptcy, and this is quite easy by getting your own economy to be quite large, and then reverse swaying for the diplomatic pact of a bankroll. They do not stop paying you the bankroll now, like they used to, when they declare bankruptcy, which means you can just absolutely drain their guts for all they're worth. It's based on how much money you're making, I think it's through your taxes, not just like how much you're making. And so by maximizing this bankroll, you can squeeze them into nothingness, which is kind of what we did with Austria-Hungary in this particular example. And these are going to be kind of the things that you are going to be doing. Also notable is if you are at peace a longer period of time, because you can be involved in no other diplomatic play, this can help for getting good reverse sway opportunities or yo-yo sway opportunities. But this is fundamentally how you do it. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, or etc. Mostly etc. Usually etc. And also, other than that, have a good one.